Hello, everyone. We are back for Teach You Tuesday. My name is Brittany Bly. I'm the founder of Pop Shop America, and Teach You Tuesday is hosted by Midtown Houston. Today, we are going to make Kokedamas, which is a really cool type of planter that is going to be surrounded with reindeer moss. We're going to have plants on the inside. The whole thing is living, and best of all, it is very simple to make and very easy to care for. So if you don't have a green thumb, all the thumbs in the world are welcome to participate in this project. It's very beginner friendly and they are very easy to water. They don't need a lot of light, and so it's going to be perfect for your home. Let's go ahead and talk through all of our supplies and then we'll get right into making. So in front of me, I have some sheet moss right here. This is living moss. We never use faux moss or preserved moss. We definitely need living moss for this project, and I already have mine in some water. We'll talk about how to prep moss a little bit more later. I have a work surface in front of me. Of course, we're going to get our hands super messy, so you definitely want a safe place to work, outdoors, or just anything that you don't mind getting some dirt on. I have two different types of soil here. Now, I know it's hard to tell the difference, but this one is actually peat moss. This one is bonsai soil. Bonsai soil is a very drying type of soil. It actually has a few different ingredients, including pumice and some kind of rocky material. Peat moss, on the other hand, is perfect for staying really wet. It's like found at the edges of bogs. And so we're getting the best of both worlds by combining them together. We also want to have some plants available. I'm going to use these ferns that I've already pulled up from the ground right here. Ferns are absolutely perfect for this project, but I also have some succulents right here. Now, those aren't quite as good, but I know they're super popular. We'll talk through that more in depth when we get to the plant portion. Another plant you could consider is something like peppermint, for example. What we really want out of our plants is something that'll work in partial shade or even most shade, and something that likes a lot of water. So any plants that fit that description are going to be perfect for this project, and that's why for today I've chosen ferns. All right, let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to blend together these two different types of soil. Now, your measurements don't need to be perfect, but I use about 75% bonsai soil and 25% peat moss. I've seen lots of other people use different amounts, so do feel free to test this, see what works for you, but a good starting measurement or a way to ratio these two different ingredients is 75 bonsai soil, 25% peat moss. So right now it's really dry. We always want to have some water handy for this project, and I'm just going to wet the soil. Just add a little bit of water. So for the amount of soil that I have here, I added probably about a quarter cup of water, and I'm just mixing them together. All of these soils and all of the water until I create about a brownie-like texture. So we want it to be nice and moist. We want it to be totally consistent. So we definitely want to mix our soil around until it's about the texture of brownie batter. Once we have it about that moist, we start to form it in our hands, squeeze it into a ball. So I'm just making this soil into the shape of a softball and into the size of a softball. Now, it's okay if it's a little bit bigger, if it's a little bit smaller. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Same thing goes with the amount of water that we added. It doesn't need to be perfect. What I'm looking for is the ability to toss the soil back and forth in between our hands or even in the air, and pieces don't break off. So mine is still perhaps slightly dry. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water and just keep kind of squeezing it into that shape. Now we have a little softball of soil. This is going to become the center of our kokedama. Once we have the shape ready, I'm going to simply split the soil in half, set it down, and wait until we get our plants inside to put it back together. Now I want to have my plants right here and ready to go. Mine are all bundled up. So I'm just going to use my scissors to cut them open. Now again, I'm using ferns. Now the reason that I like using ferns is they're perfect for low light. They're very low maintenance plants. They're very easy to care for, so it's perfect for this project. Ferns are a great one. Succulents are wildly popular. If you look up this tutorial online, you're going to see succulents used for this project everywhere you look. Now, I don't love succulents quite as much. Now, succulents can vary. Some of them are great in shade. Some of them are much better in sunny environments. So we want to be careful about what succulents we choose. Succulents also prefer to dry out completely in between waterings. Now, again, this is going to stay actually a little bit moist. So if you just take a look at my ferns right here, you'll notice that most of the soil has been broken away from the roots. Any plants we use, before we put them inside of our mud ball that we've made, we always want to break the soil away from the roots. Now, this is true for any planting project that we take on. To do that, all we do is just take our hands, put it right on in there, and just let that soil fall off. We want to be nice and gentle on the roots. Now, the reason that we want to do that is because we don't want all that excess soil, but we also want to make sure that it's nice and fresh, that we don't have anything that's like stiff and firm around the base of the plant. We want to open it up, let those roots breathe, and put it in its new home. So I've got my roots right here. Now the trick is I want to bundle them in the center of this mud ball. So I have one half of the mud ball in one hand, one half in the other hand, and now I just squeeze them back together. So I have my in the middle, and I just squeeze my mud ball back together. Now mine is definitely struggling to keep together, so we're just going to keep working it. Just use your hands to keep reforming that shape until it holds together again. So this might take a second, or it might come right together. It really just depends on your particular soil, on how wet you got it. All of that can have some distinct variables. And I'm going to keep grabbing the soil that's falling off, that's down in the container, and I'm just going to kind of keep adding it. We want to cover all of our roots. We don't want any roots to show. And once our mud ball is holding together, just like so, then we're ready for our next step. So we can just set this to the side. And now let's talk about this sheet moss. So I've got this sheet moss right here. Now let me tell you how I prepped this. All I did is I added about 1 inch of water down to the bottom of this container, and I set the sheet moss inside of it. So it's just getting wet. It's moistening up. It's allowing it to become more pliable because we're going to work it around the outside of this mud ball right here to basically become the outside of the planter. So that's why it's a living planter. So again, all we need is about 1 inch of water down at the bottom. We just leave it there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. You can leave it there for up to a couple of hours, but definitely not much longer than that. And what we're doing is, again, we're just moistening that sheet moss, getting it ready to use in this way. Now, anytime we buy sheet moss, it's going to be dry. It's not going to be super moist, so we're going to do that ourselves. So the moss comes in these big, crazy looking sheets like this. Once we have a piece that looks like a good size, we're gonna place it green side out. Your green is gonna look a little bit brownish, so I'm not sure if on camera, if you guys notice that it looks a little bit brownish, but it's actually gonna green up once you start to get it wet, once you start to get it in its home where it's gonna live. So green side goes down, brown side goes up, and I'm gonna grab one more piece just in case I need it, and we just lay it down flat. So I'm still working out of my work surface because I'm still making a big old mess with this project. So if when you're working with this moss, if you find any areas that are still dry, you can just grab your water. Just sprinkle a little bit of water right on there to moisten it up. Now we place our mud ball right in the center of the sheet moss. Again, the brown side is up. And let's just start to fold the sheet moss up. Let's just make sure that we like the size, that it's all gonna fit together, that it's gonna work once we affix this sheet moss in place. So right now we're just kind of envisioning what this is gonna be like once it's done. So let's take a look at mine right here. So now this is with the sheet moss on, and hopefully you can get a sense of how much bigger it was than before, right? The sheet moss is definitely gonna add, about a ½ an inch around the exterior. So do be prepared that once it all comes together, it's gonna be a little bit bigger than when you started. So this is really great. Mine is holding in place just a little bit, which is perfect because we're gonna want to start to twine around the outside of that moss to hold the moss in place and to hold the plant in place as well. So if you have muddy hands like mine, you might want to shake a little bit of it off. We're still going to stay dirty, so don't worry too much, but we do want to grab some twine. So I have this piece right here, and I have some other pieces over on the side. Now I want to show you something really cool about the twine when we add it. Now, if we use twine like this light cream color, then it's gonna show really visibly on our kokedama. So our kokedama is green on the outside. There's gonna be a lot of brown elements as well. It's really dark. So anything light, anything bright colored is gonna show really dramatically. On the other hand, if we use a green like this, or even a darker color, like black, like gray, like even a dark blue, it's gonna look really dull and you're barely gonna see it, so it's gonna become invisible. So when you're doing this step, you can just ask yourself, do you want some twine that you can see? Do you wanna make like a really cool pattern? Do you want to blend the kokedama with the style of your home? Or do you want something that's neutral where you can just show off the plant? So that's just a question that you can ask yourself and customize it for your style. So I want to use this little short piece for the top because I want you guys to be able to see this. So I don't want to use that green over there because it's not going to be as clear when we're doing the tutorial. So the first twine piece that I'm going to add it near the top. And the goal is to actually hold the pieces of the plant together to make sure that we have a really centralized stems and leaves. What we don't want the plant to go every which way. So let me hold this up and show you what I mean, and I'm going to set it back down to tie it. So if we were not careful, these pieces could go basically like some of them could be hanging down over here, some of them could be hanging down over here. Basically, we just have a plant that's kind of moving in every direction, which can be a little bit challenging when it first starts growing. So instead, I want these things to kind of hold together at the stem, and I'm gonna do that with my first piece of twine. So your first piece of twine is gonna go up near the top. It's gonna cover around the reindeer moss, and we want it to hold those plants in place. You can use any kind of knot for this project. All I did was just a really simple double knot. No big deal at all. Any kind of square knot, double knot, balloon knot, any of that is going to be perfect. What we want is we want to start up near the top, and that's going to be our starting point. And now I'm not sure if you can really see this, but mine is still dripping a little bit. All along the way, I was squeezing it as I go, and we're going to do that at the end, but it's going to continue to kind of get wet and be a little bit drippy while we're working on this project. So now that we have our first piece of twine in place, it's really just about wrapping it up. We want it to go in every different direction, this twine, to wrap it every angle so that the reindeer moss will hold in place. Now, I say reindeer moss a lot because it is really common. We do so many different gardening tutorials, but this type of moss right here now technically is actually a sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is really cool because it actually relates to the peat moss that we have over here that we were using for our soil. So our peat moss is also a type of sphagnum moss. Look at this mess that I'm making. And the moss that covers the outside is also a type of sphagnum moss. And sphagnum just basically means that it is a material that's been breaking down over time, and it's really rich in nutrients and perfect for keeping in water. Now again, I mentioned that we're using ferns for this project because they do like a lot of water. Now, one quirk about a Kokedama is that it's going to stay pretty wet. So we're going to squeeze excess water after we finish this project. And I'm going to tell you all about how to water this guy as well. But he's not going to stay super dry. So this is definitely not the right project for, say, a cactus or anything that prefers a very dry environment. Now, as you can see, all I'm doing is just wrapping the twine around at a million different angles. All I want is for the plant, the moss to hold in place. Once I'm done, I can just cut the piece that we're working with, and I can tie it anywhere I choose, anywhere I like. Again, you can use any kind of knot you prefer, square knots, balloon knots, double knots, whatever works best for you. I'm just doing a very simple double knot. We want it to stay nice and tight. We want it to be taut so that the reindeer moss, the moss doesn't fall off. We want it to hold really firmly in place. So now that I have my moss ball finished, you can see the twine patterns right here. I'm just going to give it a squeeze. You might also notice at this point that our beautiful, perfect softball shape has actually become a bit more of a kind of a funky potato shape. So you can continue to form this into a ball. So mine is silly looking. It's not an oval, it's not an egg, it's not a sphere, it is very shaped. So all I'm doing is I'm just squeezing it around in a circle until we have that perfect sphere that's formed. And now I've got it right here. You can see all of that twine right here. So if you like that type of pattern, again, you're gonna wanna use a lighter color like I did. If you don't want this to show, use a darker color, black, green, navy blue, any of them will work. Now that we have a finished Kokedama right here, let's talk about how to care for these guys. So the first thing that we want to do, of course, is we want to get him in his home. We want to get him to a safe spot. So this is a fern, so we definitely want this to be in a low light environment. but we want it to be maybe near a window, perhaps indoors, something that's mostly shady. Ferns also do great outdoors, definitely in places that are completely shady if it's outdoors. So let's talk about watering. How are we going to water this crazy guy? So the easiest way is actually once you have your Kokedama finished, you're ready to water it, all you want to do is just set it in a container of water like so, leave it there for about 5 minutes. Now you're going to want your Kokedama to dry out or at least feel a little bit lighter before watering. A Kokedama like this, I would water maybe 2 to 3 times a week. Think about how often you would water a hanging planter, and that's going to be a really good kind of comparison to this guy. So you can see that water is just dripping off once we pull it out. And so we squeeze out any excess water. And then we put him back to his home where we've been keeping him, and he should be good to go. Now, Kokedamas are really great to set on a plate, on a bowl, anything like that. You can also add additional pieces of twine so that you can keep these in your home as a hanging planter. So there's lots of different ways that you can style this to your taste. There are lots of different plants you can choose from, making all of the Kokedamas that you make completely different. Now, if you love this tutorial, make sure you join us again for the next Teach You Tuesday. If you want to win a Kokedama of your own, then make sure you share and tag a friend on this video to win. Now, my name is Brittany Bly, and I am the founder of Pop Shop America. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you at the next Teach You Tuesday.